The first one that I want to refer to is the parable of the lion. And within the New Testimony it says, blessed is the lion which a man eats, so that the lion becomes a man. I repeat, blessed is the lion which a man eats, so that the lion becomes a man. But cursed is the man whom a lion eats, so that the man becomes a lion. It's a very weird quote. If you're reading your Bible there, you're getting very inspired with all the compassionate actions, and then it's like, why are we speaking about people eating lions and lions eating people? But obviously here we have encrypted one of the great principles of the Tantric system that Jesus fundamentally understood and also taught, which is the fundamental principle of sublimation. This idea that it is possible to consume, or if you will, to transmute and sublime the lion inside of you, the animalistic nature of your being, that inside of you which draws you down, which makes you manifest in unconscious ways, in inhumane ways, that which distracts you from value, that which chooses selfishly, which chooses to underline your separation from everything else. That is the lion inside of us. You find this animalistic depiction in many other traditions as well, as a wolf, or as some, in German we call it a Schweinehund, which means something like a swine dog. I don't know if that's a thing. The idea is that inside of us there's this animalistic impulse, which in Tantra we know just very simply as the very let's say imbalanced, distorted aspects, especially of the first three chakras of our being, holding within them basically the patterns of our personality, the patterns of ego, the patterns of mind. We refer to them sometimes also as the vasanas and samskaras, as the vrittis, the agitations of the mind. We refer to them as the lower desires and so forth. And we know in Tantra that this is one of the main things that we are busy with. The great poet and Tantric saint Lala Dev, amazing female saint, she would talk about the necessity to control the 5 winds, the 5 vayus, those of you who've studied Hatha Yoga a little bit more deeply, to control these 5 winds, 5 vayus within our being, the 5 fundamental streams of energy within our being, which determine whether we are manifesting towards the lower or towards the higher, whether we remain in the tight grip and imprisonment of the ego mind, or whether we uplift to the heart and into the soul. She would say that if we don't control these 5 winds, the very feeble and sweet flame of the candle of our soul would continuously blow out. This is exactly what happens to the man that is eaten by the lion and therefore becomes a lion. He will just live within that animalistic nature. The soul flame, the soul little candlelight will be continuously blown out and not anymore allow us to connect to those more eternal values of our being, that which makes us godly inside of us. Whereas when we consume the lion, namely a very tantric approach, by the way, we not just, he didn't say shoo the lion off, put the lion in a cage, send him to the desert, but he said eat the lion, which, okay, for the vegetarians amongst us is maybe a little bit of a cruel idea, but the thing that lies behind this is that we consume that animalistic nature and make it completely disappear into humanness. We take that materia prima, as it is called in the alchemist tradition, we take that initial sexual potential, something known from the erotic tantra. We take that initial encrusted and even twisted and even in whatever way limited being that we might find ourselves to be. As we say in Tantra, we put the finger on the map. We start with where we are at, and then we use that lion that we find, we use that animal, we use that which is available to us at that level, which not by chance is depicted as a lion. He could have said the little sheep. He could have said the grasshopper or the snails that we shall consume. But no, he speaks about a lion, an animal with immense force. You might know from the tarot and the major arcana, we find the tarot card of the force, which is depicted as a woman which very softly holds a lion. And the lion is like a little puppy dog there, very, very sweet, which is exactly this concept of gaining force by sublimation, by alchemizing the energies inside. So that lion is consumed within our inner universe, completely transmuted and sublimed, alchemized into the human nature. The human nature being that part of us which is centered into the heart, that within us that is identified with the soul. You might know these images of Jesus with a burning heart, and then one hand pointing towards the heart and the other one pointing towards the sky. Again, this is a symbolism that you do find in the Tantric realm as well, as this reflection between Anahata and Sahasrara, this continuous reflection between the highest transcendent aspect of the universe that can be found in our crown, which is available within the very tangible feelings and states and consciousness that is alive within our heart. It is surely a big shift to go from the ego mind into the heart and soul realm of our being. But it is still very tangible, still very human, still very individualized, still very much integrated into normal life. Yet now with a willingness of acting from virtue, a willingness of acting from togetherness, from equalness, not any longer being in this submission or dominance of, for example, the third chakra, or into this sort of sneaky, opportunistic attitude that we have towards the world at the level of Svadhisthana, or even the very cruel hunter and prey relationship with the world that we have at the first level, at the root chakra. The only way to move from the animalistic nature into the human nature, and from there even into the godly nature, is to eat the lion. One hand points to the heart, one hand points above. Nothing is pointing below. It is integrated, what is happening on the first three chakras, in a wonderful way, alchemizing it continuously and completely into a force that rises us into the heart, which is one of the most significant teachings of the Tantric path. This leads to the second principle that I want to address in this lecture, which is this very well-known principle of turning the other cheek. This is something like one of the major arguments of the Satanistic church is, I've seen once an interview with this couple. No judgment, but it was difficult to watch for me, who kept saying, you see, the idea of the main idea of this Church of Satan, as they call themselves, is to understand that Christ and all the saints that talk about goodness and all these aspects, they must be wrong, because if you keep turning your other cheek, you turn one cheek, you turn the other cheek, you get slapped again, you're running out of cheeks. They would say this again and again and again. Eventually, you run out of cheeks, which is exactly the mind says, of course, this makes a lot of sense. And it is the direct manifestation of the ego mind speaking out its, let's call them interesting beliefs. Whereas this principle of turning the other cheek that Jesus is teaching brings a whole nother understanding of any life situation that we might find ourselves in. Obviously, it is easier, once you got slapped on one cheek, to withdraw, to say, excuse me, once was enough, I will leave it as it is. Obviously, this is the easier choice. It might even be the choice that we are very much used to. We all have certain defense mechanisms that make up a big percentage of the actions that we take in our lives, which not so much happen from choice and from freedom as we know in Tantra, but much rather are subdued to all sorts of patterns, which then in Tantra we will become busy gradually absorbing and purifying from our structure. The ego translates turning the other cheek into being a doormat. But what it actually means is it's a direct embodiment of the wisdom of the heart. It is an expression of total compassion, total forgiveness that doesn't necessarily forget, but will no longer refer to the mistakes of the past. There's a beautiful story that we actually were discussing yesterday in the Q&A. So some of you hear it a second time. One of our good friends from Romania who had big troubles when she started her yoga practice to find peace with her family, and her family would be very, very judgmental of her practicing yoga, even attacking her and being quite harsh with her. And this story goes like that. She was practicing a yoga pose, the triangle pose, and her father entered the room and got very angry to see her practicing yoga and slapped her on the face so hard that she fell down. And her reaction to this, giving me chills, is she simply stood up and resumed the position, which made her father to realize how weirdly he had acted. And he cried, left the room, and never addressed the subject of yoga in a negative way ever again. This is exactly an attitude of turning the other cheek. It is not in order to be slapped again. It is not the symptom of the wife that lets herself be beaten up by her crazy husband over and over again because she doesn't have the dignity of standing up for herself. That's not what we are talking about. It is the dignity of understanding that when you stand clearly for what you believe, and you radiate those virtues and values from your heart with a deep love, with a deep grace, with a deep dignity, then your being will be met with instantaneous transformation around you. It is a gesture of hope, if you will, which doesn't, not hope as in, okay, I turn my other cheek. That's not hope. That's like a sort of false hope that is like, okay, 50-50, the person might slap me again or not. But it is much rather a gesture of hope that transfigures the other as being capable of transformation. When I lead with my example of goodness, when I lead with my example of clarity, of courage, of not saying, yeah, great that you slapped me on the cheek. No, it sucked that you slapped me on the cheek. And now I'm going to do exactly what I was doing, because I know that you will get it. I know that inside of you lives a power of transformation. I don't have to refer back and nag you about what happened 20 years ago, or 2 hours ago, or 2 minutes ago. I assume when I come with my wisdom of the heart, that is already starting to be alchemized. And therefore there's no need to be afraid that you will slap me again. Because already in this presence of the extreme radiance of the human heart, all these aspects, all these petty little things of the ego, the violence of the lower chakras and so forth, is, as we spoke with the lion, consumed and alchemized into something new. There's this beautiful story of the ultimate non-violence by the great saint Inyat Khan. He was an amazing mystic. If you can read some of his accounts, they're amazingly beautiful. And one of his stories goes like this. Some of you have heard this about 200 times, but I hope you still find it delightful. I certainly love this story very much. The wonderful master Inyat Khan. He was waiting to be visited by various people to ask him advice, to take counsel with him and so forth. And within one of these moments of counsel, of exchange, a guy appeared, a man quite strong, quite big, and had a bit of a fit in within the crowd waiting to meet the master. And he said, Inyat Khan, he preaches about goodness and love and non-violence, but what if I take a gun to my head? What will he do? And he started to rant around and be a little bit cuckoo. And people were like, okay, what to do? They were trying to hold him because he was a huge guy. And the master came out of the chambers and said, no, it's fine. Let him come to me. I will speak to him. And as this big guy entered into his chambers, a few of the students wanted to follow, and he said, no, it's fine. I speak to him alone. They were all anxiously waiting in front of the door, what might happen with this crazy guy. And after just a little bit of time passed, the two of them came out of the rooms of the master, and he had his arm around him, and they were engaged in conversation, and the guy was all sweet with a smile on his face. And he said to Inyat Khan, Master, how have you disarmed me? And Inyat Khan answers to him, because I have disarmed myself. And this is exactly the message of turning the other cheek. This capacity of believing in the ultimate goodness within everything. And not even just a belief of, as I said before, probably, maybe it's true that things are mostly good, but having a direct experience of that goodness inside of you by being connected to the center of goodness in you, which is your heart, to that center of value and virtue, which then makes you into being such a radiant force of human value. Those of you who were hoping for a lecture on relationships today, we will have it next Sunday. But this principle of turning the other cheek, try to apply it within your relationship. Again, we are not talking about toxic relationships. Please, if you are in a toxic relationship and you're not safe, exit the relationship. I hope this is clear. This is a continuous disclaimer. But when we are talking about a relationship that is in itself good and having a good ground base, and there is love and there is connection and so forth, yet there is the tendency to fall into the traps of the ego and getting engaged into all sorts of fights and certain attitude of violence towards each other, even if it is not as cruel as maybe what Jesus had to go through. But still, we tend to blame each other and hurt each other in all sorts of ways, especially the closer the relationship is. Typically in love relationships or in family relationships, which are quite tight bonds, people that you share a whole lot of things with, even genes with, they tend to be falling prey to these sort of lower attitudes within our being. The more time we spend with another person, and you might experience this right now in this time of quarantine and of sort of being more encapsulated there with a few people on one pile. It is, let's say, fertile ground for these sort of tendencies to come out and to even be mirrored between us, and us getting caught up into the tendencies of the lower levels. But you always do like this and that, the whole I told you so and so forth, all of these little ways in which we sort of imprison each other within a relationship. When your consciousness, even momentarily, rises to the moment of the heart, and is just able to share from that level, to contain from that level, to connect from that level, you will see that a big amount of the tensions that you might have within your relationship, a good percentage of the drama, falls away when we connect into that wisdom of the heart that allows us to turn the other cheek, that allows us to assume that just because the other did a mistake before, it doesn't mean they have to do it again. Just because they did hurt us before, it doesn't mean that they will hurt us again necessarily. This is one of the major mechanisms to understand if you want to basically uncrust your being in all the different social connections and relationships that you might have in your life. This is the major uncrusting mechanism. Turn the other cheek. Have the hope, the transfiguration, the vision of the other one transforming in your presence. Going there with an attitude of connection from the heart, of embracing the other one continuously, and still remaining very much centered into all the virtues of the heart that we spoke about. The last principle for this lecture, and then you can post your questions. Maybe some of you posted already something. We will get to it in a moment. The third principle is this lesson that very much is now available in this time of Easter, and you can connect yourself to it quite a lot. The lesson of crucifixion and resurrection. Being nailed to the cross, even if it is not your favorite option of all, you are not into sadomasochistic practices, but it is something that is difficult to do. Jesus did say, let this cup pass in front of me if it's possible. If I don't have to live through this, dear God, then please let it pass. And then nevertheless, doing the ultimate sacrifice, giving everything to God, everything to the ultimate, everything to the specific path, the Dharma that you have to go through. And then therefore creating this full circle integration, a total alignment with God's will, which then leads to, sure, you dying on the cross. Not so nice. But guess what? A few days later, resurrecting. This is the symbolism again. Sure, you might not go all the way like Jesus did, and please, if it is not your Dharma, I don't recommend it. You can have rather walk the path of ecstasy and Tantra and die in different ways, namely in the ways of transforming yourself and having aspects of your personality break away, and these little deaths of deep and profound transformation. But the idea in this is extremely beautiful and resonant with the teachings of Tantra. Having the humbleness of taking the cup that is yours, integrating where you're meant to sit. You know, sure, Jesus probably walked with all his bloody situation and flesh torn down from his body and so forth, probably walked past a few people where he was like, you know what, it wouldn't suck to be that guy over there right now. But that wouldn't be right. That is not who I am meant to be. I am meant to live this life with these consequences, with these lessons, with what is coming at me right now. Humbly taking the lessons that you have to learn, taking the point of integration that you have to learn, willing to do the ultimate sacrifice of dying to yourself at least, like Osho was putting it. You are free when you die before you die. That is what ultimately makes you free. Then you, as he continues, don't die when you die. That is exactly the idea of being willing to nail the limitations of the ego on the cross, and then even though that is difficult and hurts, finding out with exceptionally fast effects that actually you resurrect at a different level. You are now sitting to the side of the Father in heaven, as it is put in the case of Jesus. When you make the ultimate sacrifice of aligning yourself, like we spoke last week, to your Dharma, to where you are meant to be, giving up the comforts, giving up the wishes and agendas of the ego, giving up all your little considerations that are just ideas that hold you away from who you are meant to be. When all of this is sacrificed, then you resurrect at another level. And you transform to degrees that you cannot even know yourself anymore. You cannot even understand how you could have been the way that you were before that crucifixion and resurrection happened. It is this idea, to put it a little less bloody, of the phoenix from the ashes, which is something that you might be able to relate to as an archetype. Dying to yourself, burning up in the fire of transformation, becoming ashes, becoming nothing, becoming a ruin, a pile of dust, and then from that reformulating yourself, rising again from the ashes, reviving yourself into a new version of you. For the Tantric, obviously this being related to the principle of transformation is one of the great relational points to Jesus Christ, but also reminds the Tantric of the necessity of passing spiritual tests in order to transform. Going exactly through that which might hurt the most in that moment, that which is going against all the temptations that you might have inside, that which really means giving up a part of the encrusted, predefined, limited version of yourself. Giving that up for the better, for the bigger version of you, for the more soulful version of you, for the more heartful version of you. This is the idea that the Tantrics, let's say, synthesize from this principle of crucifixion and resurrection that Jesus taught so graphically and exemplary. Hey guys, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content on spirituality, Tantra and more.
And if you want to sign up for our online classes or for our retreats, you can see our website on the description below.